it really is about you guys. So first and foremost, thank you for being here today, and thanks for everyone who's been part of it. I'm Mark Knight. I own Toolroom Records. I've been known to make 1 or 2 records, and at the weekend I run around the world putting them on. And I do a bit of radio as well. And over to my able-bodied partner, Mr. Danny Howard.
Hi, I'm Danny Howard. It's amazing to see so many people here, like Mark said. I am a DJ, producer, do a bit of radio from time to time as well, but I'm very excited to actually be here to talk about label stuff and A&R, because usually I talk about radio, but excited to be talking about label stuff and hopefully meeting some of you afterwards.
What's happening, everyone? Joe Barbe, A&R manager for Atlantic Records, on and off for about 13 years now. Also managed Rinse FM's sort of independent label that distributes through Warner's. My current roster is Riton, Good Boys, Fred Again, Nathan Dorr, and some other sort of more developing things.
Legend, thank you. All right, let's start at the top. What I'm thinking is, obviously it can be quite a simple question, but something that's really important. And Joe, do you want to kick it off? What makes you excited as an A&R when you first hear a track?
For me, I like music that draws you in from the start. Do you know what I mean? I think it's such a competitive world out there trying to get records away, that something that hits you at the beginning, a melodic loop or earwormy segment or a bit of vocal. And also generally, I'm always looking for music that makes you feel something inside. Do you know what I mean? Like a deeper connection to the lyric, or if it's an instrumental track, the mood, the atmosphere, something that really resonates with me.
And Danny, with you obviously must listen to loads of promos, both for your show and for your label. Yeah. What stands out for you?
It's actually a good point you make, because not only am I listening to demos for the label, I listen to a hell of a lot of promos like every single day to play on the radio. So a lot of records do sort of sound the same in a way. It's hard when you listen to record after record to sort of differentiate sometimes. So the records that do stick out are the ones that have a bit of originality to them. Obviously what Joe touched on, like the emotion. But I think the simple answer is just a good hook. There's a lot of records out there that are great for clubs and they serve a purpose, but for me it's got to have something about it, a good hook, whether that's the vocal, the melody, bass line. That's got to be at the heart of the record in terms of making it stand out and have that element of originality.
Mark, same for you.
Yeah, I think that is paramount, isn't it? Is fundamentally originality and hook, because that's what you dance to, that's what you remember. That's the adage that you go into a record shop and go, have you got that record that goes? And if it doesn't do that, then you're off on the wrong foot. I mean, I also look at records and think, well, that's got something. It might not be the finished article, but that's what our job is to help get the most out of that record, to go, that's 60% right, but that's got a thing. That's got a thing, and working with us who can help you develop it, it can turn into a really big thing. So it doesn't have to be completely 100% polished. And I'd say 90% of the records that come through Toolroom, I touch, or the A&R team touch, to the point of getting the stems, getting it up, because we're only as good as our last record. And that's what we do. And the fact that we care that much about that process is the reason why you guys are here today. Because if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to have a Toolroom Academy. If our quality threshold wasn't here consistently, how can we have an academy? You know, the biggest compliment we've got is people say, I've made a record and it sounds very Toolroom. In the same way as you put the radio and go, that sounds very Motown. And you don't know why, it's consistency of sound. So we're looking for a thing that fits into what we do, and it doesn't have to be finished, but start the fire, have the spark, and if you have, then we can go from there.
And Callum, for you, when you're obviously working for a major label, how does that shine through when you're looking for a track?
I think it's... it's just not meant to be, is it? Sorry, mate. Thank you. I'll ditch that. I would say... I guess, look, it's sort of... There is a difference between, I guess, expectation for majors and indies. In terms of the commerciality of a track. But I think, the guys all touched on it. I think something that, a musical hook or something that, creates some sort of emotion, some sort of feeling. Ultimately, everyone hears, whether you work in a label or not, everyone's a fan of dance music, right? So you just have to like it. If I hear something and I'm like, this is like, I just put this on, I dance to it, this is wicked. I think you just got to feel something, and as Mark touched on, I think even hearing 50% of something and being able to I've got an idea to, make this 100, then yeah, that's really the key.
Wicked. Daniel, what about you? What makes you excited about a track as an A&R?
Yeah, I think, going on from what these guys said, musicality is definitely key for me. It's important to know what we do at Anjuna has always been quite musical at its core. We're all about music that's quite rich in harmony and very much song-based. So yeah, I'd encourage producers to completely nail that, get everything in tune, get your melodies on point, make sure you really study the musical side of things, and I think the end product will shine through.
And Phil, Armada, what about for you?
Adding to what everybody else has said, there's not much because everybody's kind of covered it, but one thing that comes back from when I used to work in a shop was we used to buy stuff in to sell to people because you knew someone would buy it, or you knew it would work for some DJs. So it kind of that same principle really. Whether a DJ would play that genre or that type of track, I think that's important.
Awesome. So obviously we've touched on originality over here a second ago, but obviously if you're trying to make music for a specific genre, there's obviously quite a delicate line between obviously it fitting with a market trend and then striking a balance between it being original. How can you do that? And are there any original ways that you can do that?
I think it is important to strike the balance, but I think you can also get a bit lost and sort of confused in what it is you're trying to do. My advice, and it's always the records, especially for radio, that sort of shine through, and the artists that go on to have their own sound, is just do what you want to do and don't try and mold yourself into anything else, really. I'm not sure what the other guy's opinion is on that, but I just think there's so many artists out there that try and do what someone else does that it's just like almost a watered down version. So I'd say decide what sound you want to go for, and just go for it and stick with that, is my opinion. And there'll be a label out there for you eventually. But yeah, that's my advice. Just do what you want to do and stick to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'd deter people from trying to stick or go down market trends. I think it dilutes creativity, and I think creativity is the most important thing when making the music and establishing yourself as an artist. So yeah, I think I'd actively deter people from looking at market trends, really. And with what we do with Anjuna, it's always music first. So.
And can I let you in on a secret? Do you know the coolest genre? The genre that's always in, and that's just being good. Don't worry about genres, worry about being good. Because if you're good, you'll fit in. If you chase something, fundamentally you're unhinged. Just focus on that. Be good, and the rest will happen.
With that question, Mark, I was just going to say, obviously, the Toolroom sound you've really refined. So obviously within that, there are parameters. So how do you if you hear a track and you're like, right, that's a Toolroom sound, how can you, above and beyond that, then make that original?
Because it's good. The one thing that ties Toolroom together, and we can go from here to here, and what's the thing that ties all of that together? And that's quality. That's what underpins what we're about. If you have the consistent quality, then you can go and have an academy. Then you can have a sound. So you can be versatile within what that is. I don't want the same record all over again. It's, well, I've had that record, here comes the next one. Here's this week's version of the same record. You have to have breadth in what you do. But what ties that all together is a consistency of quality, and that's the thing to focus. Do it from here, 100% do it from here. Don't do it from, okay, what's hot on Instagram this week? We'll do it from there. That don't work. That doesn't work. That's not, I've been making records for 20 odd years, and that's because I do it because I love it. I don't care what's the big thing this week, because that'll be gone next week. Don't chase that. Follow your heart. Do what you love. That's where it has to start and stop. Get that bit nailed on. And if you do that and you practice makes better. And then you'll be somewhere.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Mark might hit me for saying this, new one. But obviously we're all here at the Toolroom Academy because we want to learn and we want to, tap into the expertise of the people that come on the stage and that are in the surroundings. But I think, in answer to your question, Carly, as well, is ultimately your end goal might be to release on Toolroom, which is an amazing goal to have. But just because you're here at Toolroom Academy, there's all these other options. And there's the example I'm thinking of is Wheats. He came through Toolroom Academy, was supported by the guys. Mark really took him under his wing, and then he decided he wanted to go down the deeper, more minimal route, and he's now releasing with Hot Creations and gone down that lane. And then there might.
Literally, you can change sound. That's allowed. You are allowed to change what you do. But he's always done it from the heart, and he had, he wanted to be there, and you can tell it resonates in everything he does. He is authentic. He lives and breathes what he does. He's not faking it. He's not doing that this week because it's the thing. He fucking loves it, and that's why he's successful, and he's very good. So exactly that. You don't have to be. All the world's best labels are up here representing today. Do you know what I mean? And you've got an incredible opportunity to make friends with these people. All these guys up here are proper, down-to-earth, good lads. This is the day to start to create those relationships, and the options are there. They really are.
So I want to talk a little bit about social media presence. How important is that when you're looking to sign an artist? Do you want to take that, Callum?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, mate.
Give him a mic.
Look, I think it's a difficult one because I'm in so many meetings where, people are saying, you have to be on TikTok, you've got to be on Instagram, you've got to be pushing. But I think that it is important to have a presence, but you have to allow your music to do the talking on that platform. I think there's nothing worse than 20 videos going, hi guys, this is how I made my drum loop. And it's like kick, snare, and it's just like you have to find a way of interacting with your audience. And Fred again is a master at doing it, because it's just obviously people are familiar, and I'm sure you've checked out his socials, but everything is just from the heart. It's people connecting, it's authentic, and you just have to find your own narrative with that. I think don't just do it to tick a box, because I think it has the opposite effect.
Is that the same with you, Joe, when obviously you're in meetings and you get a track that comes through? Say, for example, someone has, a couple of hundred Instagram followers, but the track's massive. Would you still sign it?
I think if the track's massive, always sign it for sure. But I do think that artists that are thinking in 3 dimensions will have the upper hand. We're in an age where sometimes, or often, you sort of see it before you hear it. But to echo what Callum's saying, it's about being creative about that as well, and try and do something sort of out the norm. And Fred's a great example of somebody who's really nailed that, for sure.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that question? Yeah, go for it.
Unfortunately, the reality is you've got to have a presence, like we just touched on social media. I struggle with it personally as well, but I force myself to learn every day and make sure there's content up there, whether it's around releases, events, radio shows, or whatever. It's just what you have to do as an artist now, is be on social media. I guess my advice is, if you're a new artist signing to a label, personally, I think most labels will always look at your social media, and because they're going to look at, okay, we've got this track here, how are we going to maximize that reach? What are we working with as a basis? That's your following, it's your monthly listeners on Spotify. So I just think making sure you've got all the housekeeping in order is so important. Another piece of advice is, for Spotify especially, simple things that you might not think of, like making sure your biography is up to date, making sure you've got a nice picture up there, making sure that your profile, that when the editors at Spotify look to playlist your record, they look at it, they can find a bit about you, make sure your social media handles are on there as well. This is stuff that I only learned in the last couple of years when I'm signing new artists. It's just these simple things that you sort of are easy to overlook actually can be the difference between you getting on a playlist and not. Obviously, when you sign to a label, these are things that labels should help you with, but I think to have that already in place will only benefit you in the future for sure.
And the thing is, with social media, you just never know who's looking at your stuff.
Exactly.
And I've been in so many meetings, label meetings, where people are just bringing up people's Instagram accounts. These people have no idea that anyone's even checking them out. So you just need to make sure that you're on that the whole time. Something else I want to talk about is, obviously we've mentioned social media. In decision making, do you ever consider someone's age when you're signing a record? Is that something you'd ever think about? Being honest.
Unfortunately, that has become a factor. I mean, we are all becoming slaves to the big boys that are Spotify and Apple. And the reality is, they want certain boxes ticked, whether you like that or not. That is the reality. That's the game we are playing. So that is a factor. It really is. But I think it's important for us to constantly buck that and stay true to what we're about as a scene, because age doesn't matter. Age, colour, race, whatever, none of that matters. It's music. It's a very binary thing. Is it good or is it not good? And I think we have a duty as people, figures in the industry, to make sure we stay true to that ideal, that we don't look at those things. It is a reality, but the more we buck that, the more they'll have to listen. So let's not even worry about that. Let's not even have that as a question. Let's say focus on making the music to the best it can be.
And also, if you look at some of the legends in the game, like Masters at Work, Todd Terry, these people are still going strong, Marshall Jefferson. I do want to add to that, though, because I remember when I got into the music industry, I was in my late 20s, and at the time, people said to me, you're too old. And I've now been in the music industry like 10 years. So at that point, it was a real challenge, because people were I was going into agent meetings and they were going, no, how old are you? Bump, right, you're too old, bump, you're too old. And if I would have listened, then I would never be where I am now. And it can be so hard. And, you know, whether that's, have I got enough Instagram followers? Am I old enough? The other thing I wanted to touch on is location. Is there a thing with, when it comes to location, does it matter where you live? Does that ever become a consideration? Go on, chuck in my mic.
I actually think you can use it to your advantage now. I think, obviously, it's really competitive in London. That's where it all sort of happens. But I think regional talent, if they can galvanise their area, they can create more noise, because they can access these people and they have those relationships, and it sort of makes you take notice. Do you know what I mean? So I think less so nowadays.
Have you noticed there's been a move during the pandemic that there's more local areas that are growing scenes again?
Yeah, just quickly touching on the original question was, I think if you are in a regional area or not in London, definitely it plays into your advantage. Advice I got when I first started putting nights on was just get as many of your friends and get their friends to come to your club night. And I guess the same applies to you as an artist, to listen to your music, stream your music. It's just send it to as many friends as possible, get them to send it to their friends, and just build your own network. If you're, you know, and become a local hero almost. You have to look at someone like Ben Hemsley in Newcastle. He's just sold out 1,000 tickets in 20 minutes because it's all his friends and their friends, and he's, you know, he's having all this success now. So I think actually location sort of doesn't matter in terms of having to be in somewhere like London, but does matter in terms of, like Joe said, playing into your hands and playing to your advantage for sure.
I think it's important, the resident DJ factor, because those guys have played in those venues week in, week out. They know how to fill a dance floor. They know what music to play. Like you say, they've got all the friends going to it. And then specific to certain areas, you've had music like Bassline that came out of Yorkshire, Makina that came out of North East. So location is really important, I think, really important.
Someone like Frankie War, sorry, Dan, I know he's signed to Anjuna. He refuses to come to London unless he absolutely has to. He's quite happy making music on his farm in Doncaster, so, you know, it's
his dad's a legend.
Sorry, Dan.
I think on the other hand, though, you know, looking more globally, it's maybe become less important because, you know, there's so many amazing online communities. In the internet age now, you know, you can join these communities online and be part of something that's very real and you know, I think it's, I don't know, localized scenes are great, but I think on a more global level, you still can do the thing on, you know, online and not being part of that.
So obviously there's a load of people here that are making music that probably want to get their music signed by record labels and start to build relationships with A&Rs. How can they start to do that? Are there any major do's? Are there any major don'ts?
I would say it's a tricky one because I think genuinely if something is good and working, they usually will come to you, I think, rather than the other way around. I would say you know, if someone on their on their Instagram puts up a picture of their family and then you comment, go and check your DM, that's probably not the way to do it.
Has that happened to you?
Yeah, just like, you know, it's like, oh, it's my nan's 80th birthday, check your DM, goddamn. You're like, right. Yeah, exactly. But, so I'd say that, avoid that, because it, probably will get lost. But, yeah, I think, you know, things like this, you know, are amazing because you can't beat that face-to-face human contact. And meeting the person behind making the music, I think, is the single most important thing.
How can you get noticed in someone's inbox? Because obviously you must get sent a lot of music day in, day out. How can someone shine through that?
I think I genuinely try and listen to everything, partly because of the fear of not listening to it and it being amazing. But I think, you know, I think everything will always get listened to, unless it's, you know, an essay and whatever. But I think, 9 times out of 10, there'll always be ears on stuff if you send it to the right place.
And some definite don'ts are, don't send 57 demos. Here are 57 demos, some aren't finished, unmastered. Like, if you're going to approach someone, if you're going to turn up to Man United and ask for a game, you'd bring both boots. Do you know what I mean? So don't send a record unmastered. Just bring the best thing you've ever fucking made in your life. Bring your A game. And then all of these people are super approachable. We're all down to earth. We're just people. And, it's like anything. If you want to create a relationship, just be good at being you and just be approachable, because we're all the same, we're all the same. And unfortunately, I wish I was that good and say I can listen to every demo. I don't. Is the reality. I mean, some days we get 500 demos a day. Now, if I employed someone, a team of people full time, which wouldn't be cost effective, to listen to demos all day, we just couldn't do it. It's not realistic. It's not the real world. Can you hit me up and become a mate? Of course you can. Put your head above the parapet. Think outside the box, and if you come with something good, just go, Mark, do you know what? I've made an absolute fucking bomb. You need to hear this. It's brilliant. Look, here's so-and-so playing it in a club. Look at the reaction. Come with that. Don't send an email into the... Oh, God, it. The reality is that probably won't happen. I'm just levelling with you, being honest, It's pointless to overpromise and underdeliver. Make the difference yourself. Be that person that I want to talk to. Go, it's matey from Doncaster. He's a good lad. I wonder what he's got this week. It isn't that difficult, Let's strip it back to basics. It's just creating relationships, and if you do that, then you've got a good chance of a very good chance of getting heard, and who knows where that leads to.
So if you're having 500 records sometimes on a day, what's your filter?
Going, who's hit me up out of the box, you know what I mean? Yes, we do things, but we have this saying, that's all. We become tech house blind after about 40 demos. We're like, can anyone tell if this is good, not good? And what style of music do we like again? I have no idea. I've lost complete point of reference. It's very difficult when you get that amount of content, So do something different. Think outside the box and just hit us up in a way that's going to go, oh, wow, I need to hit that guy back. Or that looks interesting. Or that sounds good, An email blind, you fill in the blanks.
Very simple. I'm sure you know this, but streamable link with download enabled, whether that's SoundCloud or Dropbox or Google, not WeTransfer, please.
Yeah. Any other do's and don'ts for you, Joe?
I think keep it short and sweet. Do you know what I mean? If you can summarize it in a short paragraph with some career highlights, like Mark said, if you've got an instinct for what are your best tracks, put them forward. Don't expect the A&R to take, hours going through 12, 15 tracks to find out which one he likes best.
Daniel, what about you? Do you want a mic?
I totally agree. I think later down the process though, when you do get feedback from an A&R, you just got to listen and make sure you listen. And I think if you get feedback, it's most likely that A&R, wants to hear more from you. So just, make sure you trust what you're hearing back.
Any don'ts?
Exactly what all these guys just said. You said it perfectly.
I think one don't that I've seen a few times over the years is like copy-pasted email and they've accidentally left the other label that they've just sent an email to. You know what I mean? Just to make sure you watch out for that one.
That's the worst thing. That's just you delete straight away if somebody does that. I would say just try to keep it simple. Just your main track, just one track. Put all your efforts in that. Don't really go over the top. I got sent a kind of a glass pyramid once that had a USB in the middle of it, and it took ages to open it up, and it was. Don't know.
I also received the same thing. So. Exactly the same thing. Wow.
Never. No, I don't think not sure. No, I don't think I even listened to the USB. I couldn't work it out. No, it's too complicated. So just keep things simple and try and get to know the person. If it's just an email thing or WhatsApp or then if you don't get your track signed, then just keep the conversation going with the A&R person on a kind of personable level. And then maybe if you know someone who's signed to that label or someone who knows the A&R, maybe they could give you a recommendation, for instance, or something like that.
I got one more down. Phil just reminded me of the glass pyramid. Someone at ADE gave me a USB attached to a little ornament in the shape of Vladimir Putin's head. Don't do that.
I was going to say, is there anything else that's random that's happened? Do people still give you USBs and CDs and all of that, and do you listen, if so?
USB, I get a lot of USBs, and sorry if anyone is planning to give me one today. I don't listen to them. I give you my email instead. I remember your name and send me the link and I'll listen that way. It's just the quickest way, to be honest.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Obviously know where you want to send it. We get so many records that someone's made a trap record. I think this one's for you, bro. It's like, well, probably not, in all fairness. So understand the nuances of what you've written and where it fits. I mean, I always start, when I start writing a record, I think about the whole process. Before I start, first of all, I think of the idea. That's paramount. You've got to have an idea, otherwise you'll be there the rest of your life and you go all over the show. So think what the idea is. I think, what's the process? What's the end game? Where's it going? Who's going to play it? What's the record label? That is part. You're making product. You know, if you're making a Mars bar, you're going to think, well, I've made a Mars bar. Now, where do I put it? Oh, it goes in the shop, and someone's going to eat it. There's a process. So you've got to think the same thing with music. I think, right, what is the whole journey of what I am doing? So know when you start where you're going to put it, and then when you finished it, send it to the right labels. You know, because you'll just piss people off from the outset if you send the wrong stuff. Christ on the bike, we've been here for 20 years, and if you don't know what we're about, then what hope have you got? So really know the nuances of what you're doing, but think about that from the very beginning, the inception of what you're doing. Where's it going? What's this record? Where do blue sky thinking? Shut your eye, think, okay, imagine someone who you want playing it in situ, and what label will support that idea and that dream. So think about that whole journey. That's paramount.
Such a good point. And obviously talking about that and talking about brands, I just want to come to you, Daniel. Obviously, Anjuna's an amazingly strong brand and it dominates a genre. It's got its own ecosystem. It'd be really amazing to know, how do new artists start to build a relationship with labels like yours? And how should they go about doing it in the early days?
Yeah, I think it's important to know, and one thing I touched on earlier was the community aspect. And I think one thing that labels like Toolroom and Anjuna have done incredibly well over the years is build those communities around the labels. You know, like opportunities like this today, the Toolroom Academy is an incredible thing. And things like, you know, online communities, Reddit communities, things like remix competitions, and, you know, just coming to live shows. All of these things, you know, if you plug yourself into it, I think, you know, you're going to get recognized and you're going to be part of it. And I think it's, you know, it's only going to do you favors in the long run.
It's such an interesting time, isn't it? Because for 2 years we were stuck at home with just the internet, and now all of a sudden shows are opening up again. We can come to things like this. What's that new transition like between obviously the online world and meeting people in person? Is it still important to do both?
I definitely think it's still important to do both, to be honest. Just do as much as you can, you know, plug yourself into everything that's happening. You know, go to as many things as you can, talk to as many people as you can. Just be part of it all, and, you know, good things will come.
Do any of you want to jump in on that question? No? Talking about building relationships with brands, obviously we spoke about Anjuna, but then also that transition of meeting people online and meeting people in real life.
I think, I think I guess it's, from my perspective, it's a little different because Ireland is definitely a brand, but I don't think it's specifically a dance music brand. I think with, you know, a lot of these guys, whether it's Toolroom or Anjuna, Armada, I think, like Daniel said, I think you have to really live it and be quite laser focused. Like if you want a record on Toolroom, get to know the people, come to the events, like plug yourself in. You know, I think you can get into this thing of just like spread betting and sending it to every label. And you know, people talk, it's a small industry, it's like, oh yeah, I got that thing to, and so you sort of feel like, you know, when you get the spiel of always wanted to sign here, like have to do this, like you're the best label in the world, and then 20 other labels have it, you know, it can seem a little disingenuous, but I think the face-to-face thing's so important. And you know, people want to work with music lovers, you know, we speak to people who, you know, can talk to us about the Island back catalogue. Oh, my grandparents loved, you know, this old Grace Jones record, and we like, and you know, that you sort of really feel part of it. So I think, yeah, the face-to-face thing's very important.
Yeah, I think just going on that as well, is nothing really gets A&Rs going than fans who talk about the tracks that they've signed and said, oh, it's really good when you put that out and that catalogue number and things like that, or the extended mix, or just talk about like the finer details of those sort of things. So if you're a fan of the label, then a good way to kind of get on good terms is to show that and prove that to the A&R you're speaking to.
I just want to come and talk to you, Joe, a little bit about major labels, if possible. What's your process in developing new artists, especially if you find someone and you're like, right, they've got it? Is there a process that you go through now?
Yeah, certainly. I think A&R fundamentally is about sort of the right hookups for that artist. I think the relationship between major labels and sort of developing artists works best when the artist might have, you know, sort of an idea of where they want to get to, and we can help sort of amplify that. And as I say, sort of that's the right singer-song, you know, songwriter for you. Put you in the room with that. You know, we're here to find like the world's best hookups for the place you want to get to.
Is that the same with you, Callum?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, also, I think it's important to say that the major label setup is more restrictive, and it's definitely not for everyone. And if, you know, we still remain good friends, but I work with a young, amazing producer called Mason Maynard, and we did a deal very early, under a development deal, and he, you know, won't mind me saying that it really got in his head about creating music for a major label. And we sort of decided to mutually sort of, you know, part ways because it was affecting him and he wasn't creating the music that he really wanted to create. So I think, you know, you have to go into it sort of knowing that it is different, the expectations are naturally higher because the investment is higher. So I think, you know, if, like Joe said, if you've got a clear idea and you know where you want to go, then I think it can be a really good match.
And obviously the balance between a major label and independent labels. How much support can you give for new artists on independent labels? So obviously, Danny, you run your own label currently as well. Is there a lot of scope for you to be able to help and develop new acts as they come through?
Yeah, for sure. More on like an A&R basis, input and feedback and time. I guess what Callum was touching on there is, you know, major label, the pressure comes because major labels are all about having hits and you know, in most cases, numbers and streams, whereas independent label, whilst it's important to have those things to run, you know, keep it sustainable and keep the business afloat, there's definitely more flexibility in working with newer artists and you know, putting the time in at the early stages of the career, and I guess that's what independents are able to do, because they're not looking for that instant, those streams and numbers.
And what about Toolroom, Mark?
Well, I'd like to think that is our USP. That's what we do, you know. We've never had a checkbook. My brother won't let us have one. Our skill is developing talent. That's why we have the academy. You know, in some ways it's modelled. I do use a lot of football analogies, so bear with me. It's the same principle as what football clubs do. You know, that's why we have all you guys here now. You're that pool of talent, and we're looking for the next Mason Mount or the next Declan Rice to put the head up, you know, up above the parapet and go, "You're good, right? Come into the first team and play in the first team." Whilst constantly looking to find new talent. You know, sorry about this, but I'm always looking to build a team. You know, I don't need 11 centre forwards and I don't need 11 right backs. I need a complement of the right artists to make our sound. And what we're very good at is knowing where you fit in the team and then supporting that with the right A&R, really hands-on stuff and advice that goes well over and above you know, what we can do. We've got a management company, Paul sat over there when he was, and we're really attentive. You know, the phone is always on, the emails are always on. You know, we live and breathe what we do. That's what we're about, is about nurturing and developing talent that we can then bring into our team and really say something for the brand. Our biggest challenge is retaining them. That is the biggest challenge independents have. Our old buddies at major labels come with a nickel, but no money put in your leg. But that is what we do. We live and breathe. That's something I'm super passionate about. You know, that's why we invented this principle. That I love that. There's nothing more rewarding than finding a Wheats or finding, you know, a Maxine or anyone like that we've found at a very organic level and held their hand and be driven by them, because, you know, we're not pulling them along, they're pulling us along. We're by the side of them, and that's what, you know, that gets me excited to get out of bed every day and have that as part of one of my responsibilities. So it's a huge part of our DNA as a label and as a brand.
Love that. Phil, what about you with Armada?
What was the original question again? I think we've gone to
Developing talent as an independent label.
We're a kind of a multi-genre label, so it varies upon which type of music. But from the trance point of view, with having Armin van Buuren as a figurehead, that attracts a lot of fans and fans who make music, and they deliver music and become part of that community, just the same way as the Anjuna sort of system works as well.
Yeah, I mean, quite similarly, to be honest. You know, we buy into the artist and the person, and I think everyone on the team is super passionate about, you know, developing the artist. We never A&R from, you know, it's never data-driven A&R. We don't really look hugely at the numbers. It's just, yeah, really about developing the artists and how far we can take them.
I just want to touch on the major labels signing of tracks. So obviously you might meet an artist, they've got a track, it's pretty strong. How do you know if that track's going to cross over? And sometimes, what are you looking to identify or work on in order to make it hit over into the mainstream?
I mean, obviously right now we have all these data tools to sort of research music and see how it's growing, and we use that quite a lot. But I think it still comes down to instinct, you know what I mean? You've got to have a feeling for how a track can grow, the sort of route to market. And I think what we can bring with sort of major label experiences, like maybe it's a 5-6 minute long club track that everyone's going crazy for, but we can help you sort of dissect it and put together a really punchy sort of 3-minute radio edit through, you know, sort of knowing what works for those platforms.
Callum, what about you?
I would say that like Joe said, that, I mean, there's so much emphasis on data, and it's, you know, and being honest, getting records off the ground is really hard. So I think that's why a lot of, you know, people that would sit above, you know, myself and Joe will be saying, you know, look for the quick wins, and they're usually on the sort of the TikToks and that sort of thing. But, you know, the track only does well even if the data is massive, if it's good. There's a lot of tracks with huge numbers that don't really do anything because in their essence they're not incredible songs. So I think, look, there'll always be a spot. If something is amazing and incredible, regardless of the numbers. And that goes back to even the age point. Like, no one asks your age, no one asks your social media following, no one asks any other questions if the music is incredible. So I think, you know, putting a long-term strategy together, these records, the guys will testify, can take up to, you know, sometimes 6 months to cross over, you know, like a very, very long time. So put your summer records out in December, and you know, I think that's the way it is. And I think if you're working with a team who can explain to you the nuances of all the departments, because it is a bigger setup, you know, and put a long-term strategy in front of you, then it's the right thing.
I think a lot of independents, well, not a lot actually, there's a few independents who are set up to be able to get records away without the need of a major label. Toolroom and Anjunadeep, 2 of them defected as another one. And I was actually, sorry to turn into interviewer, I can't help it, Carly. I wanted to ask Mark about the Vice track, Feel My Needs, because every major label in the country was after that record, but you decided to go alone, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, at some point you want to be, you know, more than Norwich, you want to play in the top 4, you want to be Man United, and these are the records that do that, and you've got to get your balls out, you know, when you're going to go to the next level, you've got to back that. There comes a ceiling where you need more than just the momentum of the record. You need to market that to a wider audience, and that takes a pair of balls to do that, because there's big money at stake here, and if it goes right, it goes very right. If it goes wrong, you're holding the baby. But that's how all these record labels grew. You know, they all started as small independents initially. They didn't all start with huge marketing budgets. They grew at success and the fact that they were prepared to take risks. And when you get the right record like that, then you go, well, let's give it a go. Because there's no... Music isn't some ethereal, magical business that's, oh, I wonder what goes on in music. It's just business, you know, and you take very basic business principles and acumen and you apply it to the product that you work with. And if you've got the right product and you know how to market things, then you've got a good chance of winning. So there was a record that we felt that had the right criteria to do well, and we backed it, and I'm glad that we did. And once you do that, you get the confidence to go, okay, we can do this. We can play in the top 4, you know. We can get in the Champions League. So, yeah, it's just taking the risk on the right record, and that definitely was the right record.
Is there any point, obviously you've touched on data, is there any point where you put the data aside just because you have belief in the artist and the record and the data's not there?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, there's, you know, I think at the heart of it, everyone is a music fan, and I don't think it's not this is a fun job. Like, it's a fun job around amazing people. I think anyone gets into it to sit and look at graphs, like work in telesales if you want to do that. Like, I think, you know, you have to listen with your gut, and there's always a space for that. I would say 100. I think that's refreshing more than anything. If you don't have to sell a record in with stats, then that's when you know you've got a good record. If you start with, it's had 43,000 UGC creations on TikTok, like, yeah, is it good? Like, I think that's the key.
I don't think that's always true with majors. I mean, if someone had told you a drum and bass remix of Men at Work was going to be a massive tune, yeah, you would have told me to get out of the room, you know. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, still playing it.
So a scenario-based question, obviously we've got loads of producers here. If you were to sign one of their tracks, how much input can they expect as an A&R on that track? And whose responsibility is it at improving the record?
Well, I think Mark said it earlier, the idea's got to be there. It could be 50-60%, and if as an A&R we hear something in it, then we'll commit to it, you know, as an investment in time and money. But the idea's got to be there. I think it always helps if it's as close to finish as possible, but not always important. Basically, just echoing what Mark said earlier.
I think that's the key. Yeah, the idea. It just might not be that well executed, and then the A&R might provide the input to make it more kind of just up to standard. I think is the thing. I think the biggest thing that we always have is making the edit. That's where all the problems kind of lie sometimes, because you're kind of trying to strip down an extended version into something that's 2.5 minutes long or something. That's really important. I think that's where record labels and A&R people kind of prove themselves or kind of come to the fore, really. I
learned a lot from Simon Dunmore when it comes to A&R. When I used to write stuff for Defected, he was committed to that principle. I mean, we would do remixes for Defected, and he would come to the old Toolroom, which was a shed outside my mum and dad's house. So I'd be in there with Simon Dunmore, going over a remix of what do we call it? Strings of Life, and it's that commitment to the product, and that stuck with me. I'm like, well, you know, that's what you do, and I'll do the same. I'll get on my bike and I'll go wherever I need to go, and I'll sit in the room with someone and we'll go through it, because once we've established the threshold of quality and where I see it, then we've got a blueprint, and then we can do the next one and go, well, did it do all the things we did last time? No, we'll go back, do that, and then if we need to do a bit more, we'll do a bit more. But as I said, we're only as good as our last records. Everything we do is a marker in history. We can't change that, can't go back. Is that people? Do you mind if we just take that one down and just do a few more tweaks? We have one opportunity to strike, and we'll employ all the expertise and manpower that we have to get the best. Can we wring another 2 or 3% out of the product? Are we fully committed to it? And we've got a brilliant team with Matt and Danny and George and myself that live and breathe this thing, and we have a standard, and we make sure that every record fits to that standard, and that is a full-time commitment. I'd like to again think that's a big thing of what we do. That's a huge USP to the business. We are fully committed to the process of proper A&R.
Yeah, I think I've been personally known to get quite surgical with my feedback. I came from a music tech background, so that's kind of, you know, the world where I've always lived in. So yeah, you need to expect, from me, you need to expect mixed down notes, you know, like music feedback, and you know, like the bigger picture. And yeah, I think, you know, I always give my feedback with conviction, but I never really want to, you know, force someone to make changes that they don't want to. I think that's important because that also dilutes creativity, and that's where, you know, relationships can break down as well.
I just wanted to touch on that actually. Say, for example, you receive A&R feedback from an A&R. As a musician, you don't necessarily agree with that. How can you begin to navigate any disagreements that come up?
Yeah, I think, like I said, you know, like you've always got to be, you know, you've always got to back your ability as an A&R. At the end of the day, you know, like we see the wider musical landscape on a daily basis. It's our jobs. So I think as an artist, you need to respect that. You need to listen. You know, that's our role. That's the role we play. But yeah, again, like I said, you know, I'd never force someone to make changes they don't want to.
I think the best principle you can live by is show and don't tell. Don't show, don't tell. So let's say we've got a kind of a disagreement with a record's gone. I'll say, tell you what, send me the stems. Let me show you something, and if you agree, great. If you don't, then we'll readdress it. But always show, don't tell. If you can do, that's how you get respect from people. If you say, and I wouldn't ask people to do things that I would do, you know. So I would take the time. If we disagree and we can't get down, we can't get to a point where we both agree on it, we can't see it, because it can be quite hard, especially with language and dealing with producers, different countries, to really get into that level of detail when you've got a language issue. So sometimes I say, tell you what, send me the stems, let me show you what I'm doing, or let me do an edit and send it back. Because if I'm prepared to do that, that also gets respect. But always show, don't tell.
One last question then before we begin to wrap up. I want to know, what's the best demo you've ever received and why?
I would say this is quite a bittersweet one for me because I didn't end up signing it. But
let's do that as a question as well. What got away?
But I'd been trying to sign Paul Wolford for ages, and we've been chatting, spent loads of money in Dishoom taking him out. And basically, you know, did a couple of singles deals, and he was like, oh mate, I've just got a really good one, sent it to me. Didn't say who it was, listened to it. I sort of didn't, I was half asleep, didn't really get it. It was like, mate, if you listen to this tune, we've just got a $100,000 offer from Ministry. I was like, oh, fuck, I'll listen to the tune. And it was looking for me with Diplo, and I was like, fuck, like, why didn't I listen? And I was like, rang him up. I was like, mate, is it gone? Is it gone? He was like, no, it's still around, but it's, he was like, now it's 150 grand. I was like, right, okay. And obviously we're in for it, and it went to Ministry. But I remember hearing it for the first time in my car, and I was just like, this is just massive. And then it obviously went on to do, but missed the boat on it. But obviously, artists that I work with now, it's so exciting receiving new music out of the studio. It's just the best part of the job. But yeah, that one will haunt me a little bit.
Anyone else want to jump on this one?
I'd probably say Dave Spoon at night. I mean, over the history of what we've done, it was so original, it's so different. And I basically only signed it because I thought, fucking hell, what a name, Dave Spoon. If anyone's got a name, Dave Spoon, I'm listening to this track. Again, it was just outside the box thing. He stuck out. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't Mix Master T, he was Dave Spoon. And I thought, wow, I'm going to listen to that. And it was at night. And then the rest is history.
I was going to follow Callum's lead, actually. It was one that I didn't end up signing, but it was a lesson learned because it was when I was at Sony and I received a demo of Fire and Trouble, which is still the most played recurrent dance record on Radio 1. And I made the mistake of playing it on the radio before I signed it. So every A&R heard it. And we just got outbid, basically. Same story as Callum. So yeah, lesson learned. If you do a radio show and you want to sign a record, sign it before you play it, yeah?
For me, right at the start of my career with Atlantic, one of my first A&R responsibilities was commissioning remixes. And we were doing a remix package for Licky Lee, I Follow Rivers, Magician. Yeah. And we paid, I won't say what we paid, but it wasn't a lot. The remix ended up being astronomically huge, probably the biggest streaming tune for Licky Lee, and she absolutely hates it. That it's a remix is her biggest tune, but just sort of really got lucky on that one.
I was living in London at the time, but I knew about this record that was big in Yorkshire called Heartbroken by T2, and just managed to get that. I did a meeting with him. I met him outside Leeds train station one day, I think, Thursday or something like that. But then everybody else got to hear about it and ended up paying a lot of money for it. But that was a good one. And then around that time as well, there was another one called H2O from the same scene that people were like begging me to go, why don't you do that one as well? And I'd already signed some other bassline things, and in the end, for some crazy reason, we didn't do it, and just I kind of really regret that because it was just a really good record, but that didn't seem to matter at the time, which was a strange way of thinking. Then other things like I think if you just get any demo in that you really like, and the outcome is that you go to lengths to try and meet the producer or try and sign it, I think that's really positive. I remember meeting Clooney when he was a student on his lunch hour and signed Separated, a track from him, and we haven't done anything else since, but that kind of worked out all right.
Mine doesn't have the level of commercial successes as everyone else's pick, but my favourite demo I signed is probably After Earth by Ben Boma. So we received the demo back in 2017. It actually came part of a playlist with like 20 demos. I know Mark said, don't do that. But this occasion, he sent these demos and they're all absolutely incredible. And I heard this one track, After Earth, and it's just musically really blew me away. It's gone on to be one of his biggest tracks. And I think, Ben's gone on to do massive things. One of the fastest rising artists in dance music. That was a real huge start for him.
Absolutely invaluable advice for the last hour. Can we just give a massive round of applause for our panel? Thank you all so much. That was really amazing.